Welcome to BioMarine Live TV. I'm Deb Mosca. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Marine Biotechnology Center of Innovation, headquartered here in Wilmington. And it's my pleasure today to lead the session entitled Algal Cell Factory, Still Science Fiction. With me on stage are representatives from 3 companies with vested interests in developing value from algae. Immediately to my right is Lionel Jennings, President and CEO of Cepic Inc. USA, and the sponsor of our session. Lionel's career includes a strong background in R&D personal healthcare products before assuming leadership roles in business development, marketing, and sales at a series of personal healthcare companies such as Procter & Gamble and L'Oreal. Next to him is the official industry partner for BioMarine from Fermental. Unfortunately, Hywel Griffiths was unable to attend today, so he sent his next best replacement, Alain Guillou. With over 20 years in the field of marine biotechnology, Alain now leads the nutrition business unit at Fermental. Founded in 2009, this clean tech company has already created multiple strategic partnerships to launch large-scale industrial exploitation of microalgae, initially in the nutritional market with bioproduction of omega-3 enriched oils, but with also an eye towards future markets in third-generation biofuels. Welcome. And last but not least is Fabrice Baudin from Eviagenics. As CEO, Fabrice brings more than 17 years' experience in the specialty food ingredient sector in world-class organizations such as Cargill. Eviagenics was initially focused on a yeast technology, which has since been sold, as I learned today, congratulations, and has expanded its current interest in developing novel products from seaweed extracts. Most recently, in partnership with the Chilean company, Jellimar. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Welcome, Fabrice. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So we've prepared a few series of questions to kind of trigger some interesting discussion around macroalgae, microalgae, and whether or not it is really ready for primetime viewing. And we had an interesting discussion just before coming into the session about what is science fiction. Because all science is fiction until it's not, until we prove it to be real. So let's start with the very basic question. Alain, do you agree, or what's your thoughts about, is the algae cell factory science fiction or real?
I'm pretty, I can say that it's not science fiction for the beginning, because microalgae, it's the beginning of the production of new kind of products that, few years ago they can say it would be impossible to produce these products at a good price, but now it's the case with oil and DHA for the best example, but this is just the beginning, and it's the beginning of non-science fiction.
Well, let's address the audience with the answer to the next part of it. Fabrice, for you've made the change from yeast into macroalgae. What prompted you, tell the audience what prompted you to make that switch?
So actually, with quite a long experience in the big organization, also seeing the consumer trends and the market trends, I kind of realized that actually there are 3 priorities today that works for the food, that works for the cosmetic, that works for the feed, and even some in agriculture. The number 1 priority is that you need to find cost-effective solutions. That has always been the case, and it will still be the case in 10 years. But there are 2 new priorities, and I think you touch about that in a certain number of sessions. The number 2 is sustainability. So, and it's not anymore like something nice to put on a logo. It's really customers that are concerned that the product they focus on are products that are going to be sustainable. So that they do not have to experience very big fluctuation of price or availability, because they are going to select more and more of a product based on this kind of criteria. And this is a key trend. And the last trend, also that was not there 5 years ago, but is becoming more and more important, is the naturality, the natural labeling. So there is more and more demand for natural products. And here again, it's for food, it's for feed, it's for cosmetic, it's even for agriculture. And these three trends are accelerated by two external elements. One is the consumer that wants that, and the second is the regulatory. And regulation is imposing more and more natural solutions or sustainable programs to the industry. So I don't know if it's science or fiction, but it's reality now, and it's going to be a reality more and more in the future.
Thank you. Lionel, what do you think about microalgae versus macroalgae? And you have an interesting technology for cultivating macroalgae. Please address the audience and let them know what your technology involves and why you think it's superior.
Okay, so first of all, at Biotech Marine, so CEPIC Biotech Marine, we work with both, although that our expertise is more on macroalgae. And the latest development indeed is is a unique process that we have developed to cultivate macroalgae in a multicellular state. So the difference between macro and microalgae is a different media that you use to grow the macroalgae cells. And they are multicellular compounds versus unicellular compounds. At the end of the day, it boils down to the benefits you are looking for and why you want to use one biomass versus the other. There's no good or bad. So in our case, the reason why we are excited about this technology with macroalgae cells is because it has been less studied. It's just the beginning. We believe that we are among the first ones to cultivate macroalgae cells. And therefore, it's going to open doors to new metabolites, new actives for cosmetic or the healthcare industry. And it enables us to really cultivate rare species of macroalgae. And we talk about the regulatory trends, we talk about biodiversity, and we think that it's very important technology, and a great addition to our portfolio is to preserve this biodiversity with rare species in the ocean.
Thank you. I wanted to turn to Alain again in terms of secondary metabolites. One of the questions that had come up in our discussion outside was the production of secondary metabolites and the use of genetic modifications to improve production of secondary metabolites. What's your view on modifying strains, and how would you do that to improve production for your desired products?
That's depend of your market. For some market, it would be acceptable to have GMOs, but for other one, mainly in Europe, it's impossible to work with GMOs to produce more secondary metabolites. So you have to do something else, and that's what we do at Fermentalg. We work with the lights, so we are able with lights to produce different metabolites and to have more of these molecules that we want to produce and to get to the market. So maybe for some market where the price is very, very important and where the people are able to accept that, it could be, but for other markets, cosmetics, feeds, and foods, it's quite impossible in Europe now and maybe elsewhere in the future.
I see, Fabrice, you're shaking your head. What markets are acceptable for genetically modified organisms to produce a product? And be clear about whether or not it's US, European, or elsewhere.
So I think the market is not the question, it's the consumer acceptance that is the question. So if you buy fuel, I mean, the fact that it has been produced by genetically modified organism, and as long as it's cheaper or greener, I think it's going to be okay. But when it comes to food and food for animals and everything you're going to be eating, maybe even cosmetic, but here I'm looking at Lionel, he's more of an expert than me. I think you have to really be careful with the consumer acceptance. The consumers are getting more and more informed about what they eat. They are going to be more and more in the future because there will be regulation that will make things more clear. And I'm not so convinced today that, definitely not in Europe, and it may actually be valid for other countries, even in the US. I'm not so convinced that the consumer will always accept something which is modified externally for what he eats or what his kids are going to eat. I think there is a pushback on this type of stuff. So yeah, that's my perception. You can look at, for example, a good example is stevia. And I think so stevia is a sweetener, natural sweetener. And today you see two approaches for stevia. You want stevia to be more rich in some type of molecules. And there are some people that are trying to produce those molecules by genetic engineering, and others that are selecting the raw material so that the extract, the natural extract, is more rich of that molecule. Which one of the two is going to succeed? We'll see, but I have my personal opinion.
Alain, what would you like to comment? You had an interesting comment outside about the genetic modification, genetic engineering, as we got into some discussion. So what would you like to add to that?
To modify, I just not keep your question. So can you repeat it, because I'm not sure.
The concept of what genetic modification means, and whether or not there is a market, as Fabrice just explained, where whether it's the consumer or a particular product, all things have to be taken into consideration before you embark down a particular pathway. So how has your organization made that decision for yourselves?
For the organization, it's the market. If the market, always is the market, this is the last place. And if people, or we know that it's not acceptable, and also there's a regulation over there, you can say, I will try to educate for many decades people to be able to accept this kind of modification. So I think we are in the same track to say, okay, it's acceptable for this kind of market, and maybe we can go there because it's possible. It's not really impossible. But
it's not science fiction yet.
Yeah, science fictions, but no, we know that we are able to do it, but we are focusing on different markets. So for
near-term value.
Yeah.
Okay, Lionel, how big is the culture collection that you have? We've heard about diversity, and that instead of using genetic engineering or genetic modification, if you look to nature, you might be able to find the strain or organism producing exactly what you want. So can you comment on what your culture collection is like and how you employ that? How do you screen your collection? How do you know which one is the best one to put forward as a product?
Okay, so indeed our focus is more to try to capitalize on the diversity of the nature. You take Brittany, it's one of the largest field for seaweeds. You have 8 different species, and so far at Biotech Marine we probably exploited about 50. So there's a long way to go. Now, not all of them are available, and this is where the cell culture come into place. And so with the process I described earlier, we have just started. So we launched the first active based on that, a new process last May. And we have already built a library of 60 different macroalgae cells. And the excitement for us is that some of them we couldn't match the DNA of those, which what is described in the literature. So it may mean that we have even probably I would say put our hands on our fingers on new species. And so this is the way we want to go for the future development. Now, how do you guess the activity of those cells or those algae versus what you are trying to achieve in terms of benefit? That's the most tricky questions. In fact, that's all out now. It boils down to understanding the biology, understanding where those seaweeds they live, what kind of stress they are exposed to, and understanding those things can give you some hints of what activity they could have and develop. And then we look at, of course, the chemical compositions of those organisms and see if they contain a high level of certain antioxidant, chlorogenic acid, phenolic acids, you name it. And then we can already have some ideas on what benefits it could deliver. For example, we know that chlorogenic acids have an efficacy on tyrosinase, and tyrosinase an efficacy on skin lightening. That would be an example.
I'd like to address the panel as a whole and ask which of you would like to answer what's the other applications for algae other than nutraceuticals or a food substance or a food alternative, such as waste remediation. Do you see that as fact or science fiction at this point?
Sorry, waste what?
Waste remediation, cleaning up wastewater using algae.
Oh, it's already, you have some extract that does that already, so it's not science fiction anymore. So
is it an extract or is it a strain of algae that's doing
No, it's an extract that does that. It's not a big application, to be honest with you, but you have multiple applications. I mean, I think you said in your speech that we were scraping the surface. I fully agree with Lionel on this. I mean, there is a huge amount of different applications for those kind of products, and today you can see them being used in food, definitely. We're talking about a business which is already $1.5 billion of extract from algae. This is already the business existing. Part of it, the big mass today is used in food as food ingredients. It's growing single digit, and you have another part which is growing double digit. And then you see applications in feed, you see application in health, you see application in agriculture, biostimulants of the plants, and so on. Huge amount of application. And I don't think we've gone through all of that. Cosmetic, you said yourself. So, and I don't know any raw material in the world that you can grow without any pesticide, any fertilizer, and which is going to consume CO2. Well, I mean, most of the natural products do, but you have to use water, you have to use fertilizer, you have to use this kind of thing, and you don't do that on seaweed. So the potential is enormous. I mean, I'm convinced that this is going to be a fantastic market, and apparently I'm not the only one to be convinced.
Well, and that's an interesting point. You mentioned consuming CO2. So we're all aware that our oceans are acidifying, and that's having a horrendous impact on the health of our oceans in many different ways. We talked earlier that many of you are cultivating your algae in natural environments in the ocean. So is that a way to kind of get 2 for 1, be able to clean up the ocean by using algae to absorb some of the acidification? You want to take that, Lyle?
Sure. Unfortunately, those that are invading the beach and the shore, they are not necessarily the good ones. Sometimes nature is not perfect. So I wish we could do something with this huge biomass that lands on the shore, on the beach, but it's not always the case. But if I'm sure fiction will be that, let's have this vision. This one day we'll do something with this waste and use it to do maybe plastic or I don't know what. But that will be, I think, a great way to go.
Any further comment?
And so microalgae are cultivated, breeding in bioreactors. So we are not directly in the, but we can use microalgae also to keep or to catch some different, non-good compounds in the environment. So it could be also used in the way that we do that, and so. It's a different market, so you can use microalgae that consume bad, I think, waste to use it to food market or feed market, but for plastic, for a lot of different applications in green chemistry, it's possible.
Lionel, you made a comment as you were answering that nature isn't always right. The seaweed that might be growing along our shores is not necessarily the ones we want to have there. So if nature isn't always right, we know humans are not always right. What is the issue with trying to modify nature in a positive, directed way?
Well, I don't think there's any issue. I mean, it's for me personally. I think if we can achieve better goals by modifying and keeping the risk equations in check, then why not? We are at the end. We run businesses, and we have to run a business and make money. You have to sell. And so that boils down to the consumer acceptance. And today, when we talk about GMO, to come back on the GMO topic, our issue is that their consumer acceptance in many markets is low and sometimes even regulated. And there's nothing I can do about it, but that's the reality. So now, I don't say that GMO is necessarily bad. So I think for some certain market, if it can help to achieve better goals, and I'm thinking maybe to design new vaccines and all that, and, for me it's perfectly okay, and it will be in fact a good way to go.
Thank you. In preparing for the session, I was trying to read about really different types of applications for algae other than what we've been discussing on stage and from your organizations. And waste remediation was one of them, and trying to reverse CO2 in ocean areas that are becoming acidified, or trying to just consume the CO2. There was a building that was built in Germany. Have you heard of the BIQ building in Hamburg, Germany? They created an external skin to the building that is fed by algae. And the algae is used to power the building. So it basically takes in light, takes in nutrients, and they generate biomass, which is then converted into energy. So that kind of is a science fiction becoming reality. If you were unconstrained by consumer needs, consumer prejudice, regulatory restrictions, what do you think could be the best application for algae? And I'll go back to you, Fabrice.
Unconstrained.
Unconstrained.
Yeah.
Let your imagination run wild.
Yeah. So,
Remember, we're in the science fiction versus fiction,
yeah.
so...
No, sure. But the problem is that after 20 years in the industry, I always think about the market first. So that's my constraint. So I can dream of many things, but at the end of the day, I always look at what the market is today and what it's going to be in the future. And I never try to go against the market. I think this is a bad bet. If you try to do something which is literally against what the consumer wants and the regulator is going to do, that's fantastic if you want to be a scientist and you will write a paper, but that's not exactly my business model. I'm purely a business guy that is there to make money. So I think you've got a lot today of, here you have, it's an interesting table here. You have people of microalgae, which has a fantastic potential. You have people of macroalgae, extracting macroalgae, extracting component about natural resource, and even people innovating with natural replication of cells of microalgae. And so you have a very nice panel, congratulations Pierre, to show the amount of options and innovations that will come out of it. So, so with that, I'm already quite satisfied, and I see a real science fiction coming.
Thank you. What about you, Elaine? Do you agree?
Totally. I agree with Fabrice that it's completely that the microalgae are a world that we know anything for the moment, and we are able to have a huge different product, address mostly all markets. So it's now time to work on this little guys.
Well, I know you come from a larger organization, CEPIC. How big is CEPIC, Inc.?
Okay. Unfortunately, I cannot comment on the dollar figures. Because
no,
we don't
just the size of
publish
employees.
Size of employees, we are about 35.
35, okay. And so, but you're part of a larger organization as well?
Right.
Okay. And so, do you see that there's a difference when you're a smaller piece of a larger piece as opposed to Eviogenics, which is a small independent company. Do you think there's different constraints, or do you both see the same constraints in developing your products?
Well, of course, we see the same constraints because it boils down to the defining the right value proposition. Now, the unique thing about CEPIC is our corporate governance enable us to, with the relative independence of CEPIC vis-à-vis Air Liquide, enable us to combine the energy and the responsiveness and the agility of a medium-sized company with the solid foundation, the financial resources of a very large group. So I feel fortunate to be part of this organization because when we can make the case to invest money or to make acquisition or to create partnership, it's a bit more available than if we were a startup and having to find the funds. So I think that's the benefit of our own organization. I think if you want to innovate and have this agility to innovate and take risk, I think you need to have an agility, and I think again, there maybe being a little bit smaller helps, in my opinion. The problem with a large organization is that you have to convince many people before making the case and taking the risk, and sometimes maybe they feel that they are going to cut a branch that they shouldn't cut, and they sometimes are very foolish to venture. When you're a small organization, you have more energy to innovate.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Also, a large organization have a lot of process, internal process, and the process is great when you go extreme, and then you have basically to document everything you want to do. I've seen situation, I won't tell any company name, where you are having the researcher that has a great idea, and the first thing he is asked to do is to establish a complete business plan with a P&L and net present value, for those that know that. And you ask a research guy to, first thing he has to do is to go on an Excel spreadsheet and fill up numbers and calculate net present value. He has no idea what it is. So just for the project to start, that's very dangerous. But the beauty of it is that at the end of the day, those big organizations that tends to that do that, and again, not naming any, then they're going to need to buy at a very high price startup company that have developed that innovation, because they all of a sudden realize that they need this type of innovation on board. And that's exactly what we are doing. We are here to do.
And I think that's kind of getting to the point that I was starting out before. If you let your mind run wild, and that's really what a lot of the entrepreneurial spirit is about. When people say it's impossible, you go and make it possible. If you think it's impossible, it will never happen because you won't try. So you have to, somewhere along that line of discovery and turning science fiction into reality, is that dream that says, I can do this. And so smaller companies tend to do that. But even so, you've expressed constraints. So to recap some of the things that we've heard here today, no matter whether you're private or public company, no matter whether you're small of 5 to 10 people or 5 to 10,000 people, you still have to answer to a boss. And that boss is ultimately your customer. If nobody wants to buy your product, you don't have a business. Your management, your boss, your CEO, your stockholders. So there's a whole range that goes into bringing an idea forward. And I think what we've heard today is that you look at the end game and work backwards, but you still need that creativity. You still need to dream. So keep dreaming and keep trying to bring those new thoughts forward. And I think today, this kind of mixture that we have with young entrepreneurs and established organizations and government agencies and faculty members that are trying to create the next generation of geniuses and entrepreneurs and high-spirited people, that has to come together in meetings like this for us to turn science fiction into reality. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the panel for their comments and for their efforts and preparation, and to thank our audience for listening. And with that, I think it's going to be a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you.